Hello everyone, this is Neil from Edureka and welcome to this session on Informatica training. Now, let's not waste any time and let's move forward to today's agenda. What we'll be beginning the session off with is by an understanding of what exactly is Informatica PowerCenter. Then moving on from there, we'll try to discuss the four major tools with respect to Informatica PowerCenter, that is the repository manager, the designer. In designer, we'll basically be seeing some of the transformations in Informatica. After that, we'll move on to the workflow manager, and then finally we'll be talking about the workflow monitor. Once you've understood these four tools, we'll try to summarize all this by looking at Informatica's architecture, and we'll understand how each of these tools fit into the complete overall architecture. So any questions with respect to today's agenda? Okay, so I've got a confirmation from Tyson, Adam, Bharat, Deepthi, Edna, Sam. Okay, as well as Jamie has a question here. Jamie is asking me, will there be any practicals? Definitely, Jamie. Now, Jamie, what you need to understand is that this training session, we'll be understanding each of these tools practically. So we'll be looking at a use case where we'll be dividing it in such a way that we'll be able to understand the roles of each of these tools. So, Jamie, I just request you to be a bit patient. There'll be some basic theoretical knowledge we'll talk before we go into each of these tools, but we'll be extensively talking about how these tools play a major role with respect to a problem solution, where we'll look at a use case and we'll try to understand how we can solve it using Informatica PowerCenter. Is that okay, Jamie? All right. So moving forward, let's try to discuss the first topic of the session, that is what is Informatica PowerCenter. Now, Informatica PowerCenter is the market's leading data integration tool and one of the mostly used ETL tool in the market present today. Now, it is only followed by IBM's data stage, but what you need to understand that is Informatica holds grip to close to 60 to 70% of the market. The remaining 30 to 40% market is the only thing that is available to other tools. So you can clearly see how Informatica is dominating the data integration platform. Now again, Informatica PowerCenter can be used for different purposes. You could migrate your data from different sources to a common data warehouse. Let's say you have data present in a different application, then you can migrate it to a newer application, making it easier for you to integrate these applications. Apart from that, you have a process known as data transformation, where you're converting the data to a format, or you're just selecting the required data that meets your condition and only then going ahead and storing it into a data warehouse. Okay, so any questions still here? Okay, and so I have a question here from Deepthi. What is a data warehouse? Okay, that's a very good question, Deepthi. Now, when you're working with ETL tools, it's important that you understand what exactly is a data warehouse. So basically, a data warehouse is quite similar to your database itself. It is a database actually, which is used to store data, which you're going to be only reading, not writing to. Now, one of the major difference between a database and a data warehouse is that the process that you'll be performing. Into a database, you're always going to be writing and updating data. But with respect to a data warehouse, you're going to be reading that data to understand the overall need of the user. So this could be, let's say you are looking for a performance of your organization. Then what you're going to do is first you're going to store the complete data into a data warehouse from which you're going to take all this data and then go ahead and visualize this. Now we'll be extensively talking about that section towards the later half of this session. But for now, just you need to understand a data warehouse is similar to a database itself, but it is used for reading purpose. Is that clear, Deepthi? Okay, now one of the other major reasons that Informatica is the market's leader because it provides a complete solution in the market. Now, if you look at the image below, this is the complete product line cycle of Informatica. Now, let's say throughout your complete process of developing a project, you need to ensure the data quality is met always through the cycle. It is something that meets the expectation of the user by the time you have your final product. Now, for that cases, you have Informatica's data quality, which is again one of the major players of Informatica. After that, let's say throughout your process cycle, you're encountering certain events or some processes that you had not expected, and it's something that of a quite complex level. In that case, to handle those events and to guide you with respect to what to do, you have Informatica's complex event processing. Similarly, your master data management or MDM. Now, MDM is one of the most popular tools of Informatica presently. It's something that is growing rapidly because of its capability to handle large amount of data as well as process it and ensure the quality. Informatica's MDM is something that's growing rapidly and is something that can give a good clash to Informatica PowerCenter itself. Now again, let's say between organizations you want to share your data, you want to expand your overall data. Now let's say you're sharing your data between two organizations. Now you need to understand the data of a single organization is too huge to be directly shared. You have certain security levels that you need to ensure. You need to make sure your data is not corrupted. For all such processes, you have Informatica's B2B data exchange tool. Now again, cloud is something that is quite rapidly growing, and Informatica in itself is one of the major players right now into the cloud market. Because if you look at the current trends, I don't know if all of you follow the news, Salesforce is one of the major contributors to Informatica's cloud technology. Salesforce has recently even gone ahead to provide a huge funding to Informatica for its cloud data integration platform and improve its features. Now, most of your Informatica products can even integrate with your Salesforce and work along with it. So again, it makes quite a lot of sense for Salesforce to invest in Informatica. Okay, so I hope with this you've got a simple understanding of how Informatica provides a complete user's needs through its various products and why it is the market's leading tool with respect to the data integration platform. Okay, so Tyson is asking me, can we just use any of these individual components rather than whole product? Definitely, Tyson, all of these products can individually be purchased through their license. But again, you need to understand most organizations that are using these tools, right? They actually go ahead and prefer to use the complete product lines rather than an individual tool because it becomes easier for them, as well as the features are something that comes into picture. It would be easier for you to integrate various Informatica products rather than having different products integrated as part of a complete process. So again, when you look at it as a complete, most organizations actually prefer to use the complete product line itself rather than an individual product. But you're free to use any of these products as per your choice. You can directly purchase the license from Informatica itself. Does that answer your question, Tyson? All right, so since there are no more questions, let's move forward and talk about one of the major concepts with Informatica PowerCenter, that is ETL. Now, your ETL, or extract, transform, and load, is basically a process through which you're taking your data from different sources. Now, this source could be of different kinds. It could be from a database, it could be from a kind of file, it could be from an XML file. You can have a COBOL file, a flat file, and so forth. So you can take your data from various types of sources. Then you can perform transformation operation. Now, transformation operation basically is a set of rules which you will be defining, based on which the data will get converted to a format that you want. Now, let's say you have about 50 lakh rows of data. Now, you don't need all of that data for your processing and getting the insight. Now, in that case, what you can do is you can write a simple transformation logic based on which the data gets filtered to meet your required condition, and then you can take it ahead and store it into a target data warehouse. Again, a data warehouse is something that is used for you to read the data and create a visualization aspect from that. Okay, now in Informatica, you don't have to completely sit down and write the transformation logic. For that, you have various transformations as part of Informatica PowerCenter Designer. So these are basically transformations which are already predefined in Informatica. There are about 35 different transformations you can use in Informatica PowerCenter. So let's say you want to join data from different sources. Based on what kind of data it is, you can use either a joiner transformation or you have the union transformation. But these transformations vary with certain logic based on which you're going to be using. Don't worry, we'll be talking about each of them extensively in our upcoming sessions as well. Okay, so I hope with this you've got a simple understanding of what exactly is ETL and how it works. Just to give you a better idea, this is a simple representation of the same ETL process. You're going to take the data from different kinds of sources. So here there's an XML file, you have COBOL, flat file, even a database. So you can extract the data from each of these sources, then you can perform certain transformation logic. And finally, once you have the data that you want, you can go ahead and store it into your data warehouse itself. Okay, so I hope you're clear. Okay, so I've got a confirmation from Adam, Bharat, Sam, Tyson, Deepthi, Edna, Jamie. That's great to see, guys. So again, one thing I want you guys to be clear on is at any point, if there's certain concept or certain key term itself that you're not clear with, please put across your question in the chat box so that I'll be able to clarify it then and there itself. It's important that you have a complete understanding of all these terms while you're learning Informatica PowerCenter. Okay, so at any point, if you're not clear, make sure you put across your questions in the chat box. Okay. Now, before we move ahead and talk about the PowerCenter tools, what we'll be doing is we'll be talking about a use case here. Okay, now we'll be considering the e-commerce domain today. So basically the data that you have about 10,000 customer details, you have about 5,000 product details, and about 40,000 transaction details of the same 10,000 customers, what they have purchased and how much they have purchased, when they have purchased, and so forth. Okay, now what we want to extract from this data are mainly two things. Now the first is slightly simple process. What we need to do is we need to centralize the data of the customers from different branches into a centralized database. That is, you want to take the details of the customers from different branches and then store it into a central database. Okay. The second is a slightly advanced use case where we're trying to understand which are the top 3 selling categories of all my available categories. So here you need to identify the details with respect to your product as well as transaction details. Then you need to find out which category sells the most product. So we'll be talking both the simple and the advanced transformation throughout the complete logic. I hope you guys are clear with respect to the problem statement. Now, to solve our problem, what we'll basically be doing is we'll be dividing it into 4 phases. Now, each of these phases are such that each of the PowerCenter tools can handle each of the phases. Now, let me just give you a simple overview of how it's going to be divided. Now, the first phase is going to be handled by your repository manager. Now, in your repository manager, you'll basically be creating a project folder in which you're going to store everything that we have created today. Okay, so basically it's going to be a collection where everything that you're creating will be stored. Then you have your PowerCenter designer. Now, designer is something where we'll be creating our mapping. Now, mapping is a very simple thing. It basically tells you how the data is going to be transferred from the source to the target data warehouse. But only thing is that you'll be using transformations here to convert the data to the required format that we want. Okay. After that comes your workflow manager. Now, in your workflow manager, what you're basically going to do is you're going to be creating a workflow. Now, your mapping in itself is not something that can be executed directly. To execute your mapping, you need to create a workflow associated to it. So we'll be creating a workflow for that. Okay. Once we have created our workflow, we're going to begin the execution. Then we're going to check the status of the workflow in our workflow monitor, whether there's any error encountered or whether after successful execution of the workflow, what is the result as well. So all that can be checked with respect to your workflow monitor. So I hope you guys have a simple understanding of what each of these tools does and how we're going to be using them to solve our problems. Okay, so I've got a confirmation from Adam, Sam, Tyson, Edna, Deepthi, Bharat. That's great to see you guys. So now let's move forward and talk about the first phase of our problem where we'll be using Informatica PowerCenter Repository Manager to solve our problem. So first what we'll be doing is we'll be creating a work folder in our repository. Okay, now again, your work folder is quite similar to the project that you have in your programming language where you're going to be storing all your codes into a single folder there. Here you're going to call it as a work folder. Now, what I'm going to be storing in my work folder in my repository is my sources, my targets, mapping, workflow, everything in a single location. Now, what I'm going to store in my work folder is that I'm going to store the sources and targets that I'm going to be using as part of today's session, the mappings that I'll be creating, as well as the workflows that I'll be creating. Everything is going to be stored in a single location for making it easy for me to access it anytime I want. Okay, now, before we move ahead and look at the repository manager, we need to understand what exactly is a repository. Now, your repository basically is a collection of all the information and the activities that you have done in Informatica PowerCenter tools. Now, everything that you're working out with Informatica is going to be considered to be an object, and all these objects are going to be stored in your repository. Okay, it could be your sources, it could be your targets, it could be a mapping. Everything is considered as an object here, and that is going to be stored inside your repository database. Okay, now your repository is one of the major part. It basically acts as a spine to all of your other tools because each of these tools have to communicate with the repository to store as well as take the data from the current working folder. So your repository manager basically acts as a single point of contact for all your other 3 remaining tools. Okay, now there are mainly 3 key components of your repository in Informatica. You have your repository service, your repository service process, and your repository database. Now your repository service is the service that communicates with respect to all the client tools. Repository service process is a child process of the repository service, which again takes the initiative and works the complete logic with respect to that. Your repository database is a database where you're going to be storing all the corresponding data that you're going to be using in your work folder. Okay, so I hope you guys are clear with respect to what is a repository. Okay, Bharat has a very good question here. Bharat is asking me, will the complete details of the source and target be stored in the repository database? No, Bharat, that's a very good question actually. Now, details with respect to your source and target, mainly their metadata is going to be stored in the repository database, not the complete data. So this way it becomes easier for the repository service also to know how the data looks like and what exactly data is present in the source. But again, you're going to be storing only the metadata of your actual sources and targets. Is that clear, Bharat? Great. Okay, so moving forward, the first tool that we'll be discussing is Informatica PowerCenter Repository Manager. Okay, now again, rather than explaining this to you, let me go ahead and show you the Informatica PowerCenter Repository Manager. So I hope all of you have gone ahead and installed Informatica PowerCenter on your systems. If you have not, please let me know so that we can schedule a session later to help you with the problems that you have faced while installing. Okay, so let me go ahead and show you the Informatica PowerCenter Repository Manager. So let me go ahead and launch my Repository Manager. Now, you can either search for your Repository Manager, or again, you can go into your Windows, and then if you come down to Informatica folder itself, okay, there you can find the complete Informatica PowerCenter tools. So what we need is Informatica PowerCenter Repository Manager. Just click on it, and Informatica PowerCenter Repository Manager is getting launched. Okay, now first thing what we need to do is we need to connect to our repository. Now you would have configured this while you were installing Informatica PowerCenter itself. Again, if any of you have had a problem while you were configuring your repository, do let me know so that I'll be able to assist you after the session. Okay, so once you've selected your repository, you can right click and go to connect option, or you can directly choose the connect option present in the left corner here. It'll ask you the username and password to your repository, and then you can go ahead and connect your repository. So these are basically my work folders present inside my repository. Now what I'm going to do, I'm going to create a new work folder. Now you can go into your folder and then you can create a new work folder here. So while creating, one thing you need to remember is that you cannot use space anywhere in Informatica. So this is a naming convention that is completely used through Informatica PowerCenter. So always remember, if you want to put a space between two keywords, then make use of underscore. So what I'm going to call is, let me call this Informatica training, and let me give it today's date. So let's say 17/4. Okay, so once I click on OK, you can see correspondingly my folder has been created. Now by default you have only the configuration folder present inside my work folder, but to give you a simple understanding, let's say you have created a project and you are working on it. Then if you go inside that folder, you can see different sources that I'm using. These are my sources. These are my targets, as well as the mappings that I have created and the corresponding workflows as well. Okay, so there are certain naming conventions for all this. We'll be talking about that when we are working with them. So this is basically how your Informatica PowerCenter Repository Manager looks like. Now again, here you can connect and disconnect your repositories. You can add repository itself. Again, you can even configure the domain in which your repository is going to belong to as well. So basically these are the things that you would have worked out while you were installing Informatica PowerCenter. But again, from an admin perspective, now this is one of the tools that you'll be using on a regular basis. Okay, even let's say you want to import certain mapping or certain source details, even a workflow detail, then you can import from an XML object as well. Okay, you can even compare or delete certain work folders as well. Let's say you have two work folders and you want to compare them, how they're different. So again, your compare operation comes into picture. Now versioning is one of the key tools in Informatica PowerCenter. We'll not be extensively talking about versioning as part of today's session, but to give you a simple understanding, versioning basically keeps track of all the changes that you have done. So that way it becomes easier for you to revert back to certain change in case you made a certain mistake. Now again, with respect to security, you can change the current password for your repository. Always remember that. And then you can check the source target dependencies here. Now again, all the dependencies you can check with respect to, let's say certain source is not correctly loading. Then what you can do is you can go ahead and check the dependency of it and try to understand why it is not correctly loading, or if there's any errors with respect to that same. Similarly, you can create shortcuts to these dependencies, and you can even search across all the work folders. Let's say there's a certain mapping that you have created for a project, but you know the name of the mapping, but you're not sure on which project. So then definitely your search by target keyword or search all comes into handy there. Okay, now in the tools you have all the Informatica PowerCenter tools. Now you can find them here as well. These are the complete client tools that are present in your Informatica PowerCenter. Now all your Informatica PowerCenter tools will have this option for you to switch between the client tools. This is something that is used to make it easier for you to work around with respect to that tool. All these tools depend on each other. Mainly your designer, workflow manager and workflow monitor, each of them depend on each other extensively. So switching between them has been made easy by putting these icons present here. So talking about the repository dashboard itself, so this is your navigator field where you can navigate between the different work folders. This is your workspace where you have the complete details with respect to each of the data, each of the work folders associated, and this is finally your output. Now again, any operation that you perform, the corresponding output would be generated here. So I hope you guys have a simple understanding with respect to how the repository manager works and how it looks like. Okay, Sam is asking me, is the repository manager something used only by the administrator? No, Sam. Repository manager is a tool that can be used by anyone who has Informatica installed, but it is something that is mainly used by administrators and team leads, because again, there comes your permission. If anyone can modify a workflow, then it becomes problematic, right? You may make certain changes with respect to your teammates' workflows. I'm not saying you would, but at times it tends to happen in an organization. While you're trying to take some information on that, you may end up making certain changes, which may affect his project as well. So for such cases, what they've done mainly is administrators as well as team leads are usually the people who work with the repository manager. Okay, does that answer your question, Sam? Okay, so moving forward, let's talk about the second phase of our problem, that is going to be solved using Informatica PowerCenter Designer. Now, in our Informatica PowerCenter Designer, what you're basically going to do is that we're going to create a mapping. Now, in that mapping, you're going to take the source definition, then you're going to be creating various transformations, and finally, you're going to either create a target definition or link it to an existing target definition. And all these components are going to be connected to each other in that mapping. Now, again, when you talk about mapping, it basically is an iconic representation of each of these components. Your source has a specific icon, each of the transformation has a specific icon, your target definition has an icon. So you'll be seeing all that when you're going to be designing the mapping in the next session. But before we go ahead and look at Informatica PowerCenter Designer, what you need to understand is what is a mapping as such. Now, your mapping basically is a set of sources and target definitions which are basically linked to each other through various transformations. Okay, in that transformation, you're basically going to define the set of rules through which the data is going to get transformed before it reaches the target definition. And if you look at the image below, this is a simple mapping here. So basically, I have a single source. I'm going to use two different transformations, and finally, I'm going to store it into my target. So this is how your mapping looks like. So here you can see the source has a specific icon. Each of the transformation has a specific icon. So this is a source qualified transformation, which is a basic transformation. And then you have a filter transformation here as well. So each of the transformation in itself has an iconic representation. And finally, you have your target definition. So all this, once it is connected, is going to be called a mapping. Okay, so I hope you guys are clear with respect to what is a mapping. Now, please make sure you're clear with respect to this concept, because this is the fundamentals for working with Informatica. Because in your mapping, you're going to be defining all the logic as to how the data has to be changed. So again, okay, that's great to see. Oh, I've got a confirmation from everyone. So let's move forward and talk about the second tool, that is Informatica PowerCenter Designer. Now, again, let me go ahead and show you how the Informatica PowerCenter Designer looks like. Now, for that, what I'm going to do is, rather than going and launching it individually, from my repository manager itself, I'm going to launch my design. So here you can see the D icon present here. Okay, if I go around under there, you can see the highlight. This is Informatica PowerCenter Designer. If you just click on it, automatically Informatica PowerCenter Designer gets launched. So again, here if you see, I already have a mapping created here, but I need to open a new mapping. So my work folder was named as Informatica Training 17.4. So let me just click that, right click and go to open option here. So this will load my workspace. Now again, there are three major things here. You have your navigator to your left, you have your workspace where you'll be designing the mapping, and finally you have the output for the mappings that you have designed. Okay, now one key feature that Informatica provides is that it validates your mapping every time you save it. So let's say you made certain changes in your mapping, then Informatica will always check if your mapping is valid. Every time you save, Informatica checks if it is valid or not. Okay, now again, with respect to workspaces, there are mainly 5 different workspaces that Informatica PowerCenter provides us, but we'll be working mainly with 3 workspaces there. The first workspace is a source analyzer workspace. Second is your target designer workspace, and the third major one that we'll be working with today is your mapping designer workspace. In your source analyzer workspace, you're basically going to import all your sources, as well as you're going to modify any changes with respect to the source definition that you have loaded. Okay, so let me go ahead and show you how to load a source definition. Just go to source tab. So here you can see your source can be imported from different platforms. So it could be from a database, it could be a file. Even under file, it could either be from a COBOL file or it can be an XML definition as well. Again, you could use a TIBCO repository, but since I have not configured my PowerCenter to connect with a TIBCO repository, it's not available at present. But again, if you have your data present there, you can take it from there. PeopleSoft is another option. If you have a web service, then you can import it from there. Now, Power Exchange was a tool that was actually provided by Informatica for ETL process, which was later replaced by Informatica PowerCenter. So let's say your source is present on Power Exchange, you can import that as well. Apart from that, I had also mentioned Salesforce is a major player with respect to Informatica. So if your data is present on salesforce.com as well, you can take it. Let's say you won't even create a source definition, you can do that in Informatica PowerCenter as well. Okay, Now, if you guys remember, the first use case problem that we had to do was we need to combine the data from different departments to a single centralized database for our customers. Okay, now the details of my customers are present in a file. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to click on import from a file. So here I need to open the flat file. Now, what you need to do is you need to go to the location where your source files are present. Then you need to change the file type. So again, make it all files and you can see the complete files details here. So here you cannot multi-select and load all the 3 files at once. This is mainly because you have a setup wizard which makes it easier for you to load the file. For each of the file, a separate wizard is going to be launched. So let me begin by first importing the first details. Click on OK. So here you have the complete details with respect to my source. So these are basically the first 500 rows. Now one thing you need to remember is you need to identify what kind of flat file you're importing. Now mine is a delimited file, that is a comma separated file. So I'm going to click on delimited. But let's say if your file is of a fixed width type, then you can select that option here. Now apart from that, what you need to remember in this line is that you need to click on this option, import field names from first line. Now this is something that is very important that you do, because if you don't check on this, what happens is it considers the first row also to be a data. Okay, now that way 2 major things happen. First is it becomes problematic to identify what kind of data is present in your complete row, because your first row could contain a string but the rest of the column could have an integer data. So because it has different kinds, it becomes problem for Informatica as well to identify what kind of data is present in that complete column. So always make sure you click on this option if your first row has your header field. Okay, then go ahead to next. Now here again, with respect to a delimited file, you have different kinds of delimited file. Now mine is a comma separated file, so I'm going to leave it at comma, but if you're using any different delimiter, you can specify that here. Okay, so these are basically how my columns have been divided here. And if you click on next, you can see the different columns and their corresponding field names. Now each of these corresponding columns have been assigned a data type. Along with that, it has also been assigned a length as to how much space has to be allocated for each of these elements present in this column. Let's say for my customer ID, the length is going to be 5. So maximum size that it is going to occupy is the size of 5. And it's going to be of a numeric type. So let's say you want to change it, then you can change it here. You can make it either a text format or you can change it to a datetime format as well. So if you see here, I have customer ID, customer name, address, their city, the country, their contact number, and their email ID as well. Okay, so all this seems to be correct. So let me go ahead and import this source definition. So once you click on finish, automatically the source definition is loaded. Similarly, let me go ahead and import the other 2 source definitions as well. Let me click on finish. So my second source file definition has been loaded. So now I have successfully loaded all my 3 source definitions. So it's time I go ahead to the final workspace here, that is mapping designer workspace. So here what we're going to do is we're going to be creating the mapping or a set of rules based on which the data is going to be transferred from the source to the target definition. Okay, now first thing is go to mappings tab and go click on create option here. Now by naming conventions, all your mapping should start with a prefix of M followed by the name of that mapping. So here what I'm going to say is I'm going to call M customer join. Okay, and click on OK. Now I need to import my source details. Now if you go inside the source folder here, you can see an option of flat file. Now under my flat file, you can see all the 3 customer details. So just select all 3 of them and then drag it and drop it to your workspace. Let me just arrange this. So you have your source set 1, source set 2 and source set 3. Now along with that, a basic transformation, that is your source qualifier transformation, is also created. But at this point, don't worry about what exactly it is, because this is a basic transformation that gets created every time you're loading table from a flat file or from a relational table. Okay, so right now you don't need to worry about what it is and what exactly it does. Okay, so I have 3 of my sources. Now I need to use a transformation and join all the 3 source tables. Okay, for that what you're going to do is go to the transformations tab and click on create. Now here you can see the complete list of transformations that are available to you, through which you can perform different operations. Now the transformation I'm going to be using today is a union transformation. Okay, now union transformation basically lets me join n number of sources. But one of the major things you need to remember while you're working with union transformation is that you need to have same columns in all the corresponding sources, as well as they need to be of the same data type. Okay, so here what I'm going to do is I'm going to modify my union transformation. So just double click to edit this transformation and go to the groups option. Now groups basically are used to tell how many sources you have. Okay, so I have 3 groups. So let me just say cust-group 1. I need to create another group. So I'm going to call it customer group 2. And third group, that is called customer group 3. Okay, once you click on apply and OK, you can see basically 3 new rows has been added to my transformations. You have your customer group 1, customer group 2 and customer group 3. Now at this point, if you select all, drag it from a source qualifier and drop it here, you can see these same ports have been added throughout my groups. That is, I know these rows are present through all my sources and I want all of them to be present as part of each of the groups. So if you drag and drop just one, all of them will be correspondingly added to your transformation. So clearly here, okay, that's great. Now what I need to do is I need to link each of these 3 sources to the corresponding groups. Now my source 2 is going to go to group 2 and my source 3 is going to go to group 3. So they have correspondingly been linked. So always make sure to check if the correct port from one of the sources is correctly linking to the correct port. So here you can see customer ID from my source qualified transformation is correctly being linked to customer ID of my group 2. So again, same customer ID from source 3 is being linked to customer ID from source 3. Always make sure you have used the correct mappings, because one small mistake here can make it problematic for your mapping. Okay, so I'm just going to make a slight change with respect to my union transformation. Now here, if you go to the ports tab, you can see you cannot edit any of these 3 ports. Okay, this is one of the key features of union transformation. You cannot edit the ports, but you can directly edit the groups. But if you go to the groups port tab, here you can slightly modify the overall definition for each of these ports. Okay, now what I'm going to do is I'm going to slightly increase the precision of each of these groups. Okay, for customer name, let me make it 22. For address 1, I'll make it 42. City again becomes 24. My country becomes 18. Contact number remains 12, and email ID, I'll make it 40. So these are certain changes I'm making based on my data. This is because I have compared with respect to all the 3 sources and then decided these precision values. So always make sure you choose the correct precision, because what happens is if you do not set the correct length for your rows, then certain data gets cut off. So you don't get the complete data. Okay, so to summarize what we have done till here, I have basically loaded 3 sources, then used a transformation, that is union transformation, in which I'm going to join all the data present in these 3 sources, and then now it's time we create a target definition in which you're going to store all this data. Now there are mainly 2 ways in which you can create a target definition. First is going to the target designer workspace. Here you can create a target definition from scratch. You can either import it from an existing definition or you can create it from scratch. But since we need a target definition that is similar to our transformation, what I'm going to do is that I'm going to model my target definition after a transformation itself. Now this is a very straightforward and easy process. Just right click on the transformation and you have the option of create and add target. So this will basically create a target definition based on my union transformation. Okay, so here if you see, I have same customer ID, I have customer name, address 1, city, country, contact number and email, as well as the same length that I had specified in my union transformation. Okay, so I'm just going to make slight changes with my target definition as well. So go back to your target designer workspace. Inside a target folder, you can find your target definition. Just drag it and drop it to the workspace. Okay, so any questions still here? I have a question here from Edna. Edna is asking me, by creating a target definition, is there a corresponding table created for it? No, Edna. That's a very good question. Now, your target definition also can be of different types. Like you can import your data from different sources, your target also can be of different kinds. Now, I'll just show you how you can do that. Go inside your target definition. Okay, now first thing what I want to do is I need to rename this, because again, there is a certain convention for target definitions. All targets start with the prefix of TGT. followed by the name of the target table you want to set. So let's say customer underscore join. Okay, once you click on it, it gets renamed. Now comes the type of output file. Now here by default Oracle is set because Oracle is my default repository database, but you can change it. Let's say you want a flat file, you can create a flat file. If you want to store the output on an Microsoft SQL server, you can do that as well. But once you've modified this, then you need to create a table in your database as well. So for that, go to your target option and then go to generate/execute SQL. Once you click on this, you get this option of create table, primary key, foreign key. This is something that gets set by default. Okay, now you need to select a connection object to your database. Now I have already created different connection objects. So to my target database, the connection object is Oracle XE underscore HR underscore TGT. Okay, so through this object, I'm going to connect to my target database and then work with it. Is that okay? So you can see here it's successfully created. Okay, so Sam is asking me how do I create a connection object. Oh, Sam, that's quite easy. Let me just finish this step and I'll show you how it's done. Once you click on generate and execute option, automatically a table is going to get created. Okay, so just let me show you how the output is created. So if you go to your output console, you can see an SQL query is run to my database for creating the table as per my requirement. Now coming to how to create a connection object. So for that, you can either be in your target designer workspace or source analyzer workspace. Here inside your sources, you have an option of import from database. Now, if you have not created a connection object, then just click on these three dots. Here you can basically go to the add option and then you can specify the type of driver which you want. Once you have specified the driver, there are a lot of options here based on your requirements. You can select whichever is to your need. Once you've created that, just configure it correspondingly to your database. And then once you've completed that, just click on apply to create the new object. Is that clear, Sam? Okay. So let me go back to my mapping designer workspace. I'll just remove this and put in the updated target definition. So just drag it and drop it here. And let me just connect my target definition to my transformation to complete my mapping. You can either select the ports from here or you have an option of auto linking. So just right click on your workspace and go to the auto link option. Here you can specify the source of your link and the destination of your link. Now my source is my union transformation and my target is my target definition. So there are two ways you can even link these two. You can either link them by name or link them by position as per your requirement. Now I need to link them by name. So I have selected this. If I click on apply now. Okay, so I need to select the output option here and click on apply now. Okay, so the output from my union transformation has been linked to my target definition. And finally, I need to save this. Now, again, as I had told earlier, once you save it, Informatica automatically checks if your mapping is valid or not, or if you've made any corrections through your mapping. So here you can see the complete map has been validated and it is correct. So any questions with respect to how to design a mapping or with respect to Informatica PowerCenter Designer? Now, what I'll be doing is I'll first go ahead and completely execute the first use case. Then I'll show you how you can work with the second use case, which is slightly advanced. So once you have a complete idea, it'll be easier for you also to relate to the advanced use case as well. So for now, I hope you guys are clear with respect to how to create a mapping and with respect to Informatica PowerCenter Designer. Any questions still here? Okay, so I have a question here from Adam. Adam is asking me, has the data been transferred from the sources to the targets? No, Adam. So basically what we have done here with the mapping is basically we've defined the rules based on which the data is going to be transferred. Now transferring of data comes in the next part. Okay, so I request you to be a bit patient. Okay, so since we've got a confirmation from everyone, we can actually come to an end of our phase 2, which we were dealing with Informatica PowerCenter Designer. Now, before we actually move into the next phase, there are some small things that I'd like to introduce to you guys. So you've seen 3 of the 5 workspaces here. We've talked about the mapping designer workspace. We've talked about the target designer workspace, as well as the source analyzer workspace. Now, the remaining 2 workspaces, one is Maplet Designer and the second is a transformation developer. Now, every transformation in Informatica can be converted to something known as a reusable transformation. Now, you can just double click on the transformation and you have an option here known as make reusable. What do I mean by make reusable? Let's say you're performing a certain logic using a specific transformation in one mapping. and you want to use the same transformation and the same logic in another mapping. So you cannot directly copy this transformation. For such cases, what happens is you can make the transformation reusable. That way you can use it across different mappings. Now, once you make a transformation reusable, like how you have different folders here which have your sources, targets, similarly you will have one with transformations as well. So let me just show you an example here. Let me just make this union transformation reusable. So double click on it, click on make reusable, click on apply, and you're done. Now if you go inside the transformation folder, you can find the union transformation present here. So any mapping I'm going to be creating in this work folder, for that I can reuse this transformation if I want to. Okay, so to modify this transformation, I need to go to the transformation developer workspace. Here I can just drag and drop it and make the required changes I want to this transformation. Okay, so this is a workspace which is used to modify reusable transformations. Your source analyzer workspace was for modifying source details, target designer workspace was for modifying target definitions, and your transformation developer workspace is for modifying reusable transformations. Then comes your fifth workspace, that is Maplet Designer. Now your Maplet Designer is quite straightforward here. A maplet basically is a collection of different reusable transformations. Like how you have a mapping, your maplet is also quite similar to it. But how is it different? Your maplet mainly comprises of reusable transformations, and here you do not load source and target definition. For that you have different substitutes as input and output. Now you don't need to worry much about maplets here at the moment, but this is just to give you an idea with respect to the different workspaces. Okay, so moving on, if you go back to our presentation, okay, so we've completed the phase 2 here. Now let's go to the phase 3 that is going to be handled by the third tool, that is Informatica PowerCenter Workflow Manager. Now here what happens basically is you're going to create workflows and use various task components to execute this mapping. Now if you remember, we had already discussed that mappings are in itself not directly executable. So using a workflow, we can execute a map. But that doesn't mean you can execute only one mapping in a workflow. Now we'll be seeing more about that in the upcoming slide. But before we move forward to the Informatica PowerCenter Workflow Manager tool, there's an obvious question that would come to you. What exactly is a workflow? Now again, your workflow is something similar to your mapping itself. Here also what you're basically going to do is define a set of rules which will help you understand the execution of your mapping. Okay, now while you're working on a real-time project, you're not going to be creating only one mapping. You're going to have multiple mappings as such, which are all going to be related and work around with each other. Okay, so in those cases, what you do is you need to execute multiple mappings, but there should be a corresponding sequence on when a mapping should be executed, how it has to be executed. So all that is something that is going to be defined as part of your workflow. Now, if you look at the image here, this is a simple example of a workflow. So here you have something known as start. So all your workflows begins from start, and then you're actually branching out into two main branches. One is executing session 1, then it's executing session 2. You're executing session 3 while session 1 is going to get executed, and then you're making a decision based on a certain condition. Let's say that decision is true, then you're going to execute session 4, or else what you can do is you can schedule or send an email with information that you want. So here you can see simultaneously two sessions are getting executed. Now sessions are basically tasks which tell which mapping has to get executed. So we'll be seeing more about workflows and sessions right away. Let me go back to my Informatica PowerCenter Designer, and here let me go ahead and launch Informatica PowerCenter Workflow Manager. Okay, now there are mainly two ways you can create a workflow. One is an automated way, and the second is where you manually create a mapping. Now for simple mappings where you wish to execute it directly, you can go ahead and create the automatic mapping. It's very straightforward. Just right click on your workspace and you get this option, generate workflow. Okay, when you do that, automatically a workflow gets created for your mapping. But let me show you how to create it manually, so that way you can have a good understanding and you can also try it out. So just click on the W icon present here and automatically Informatica PowerCenter Workflow Manager is launched. So here you can see I'm already inside my working folder. Now again, similarly, as you had seen with PowerCenter Designer, you also have multiple workspaces here. You have Workflow Designer where we'll be creating simple workflows. Worklet Designer is similar to your Maplet Designer's workspace. Here you can work with reusable tasks, and your task developer basically is a workspace where you'll be modifying reusable tasks. Okay, now what do I mean by tasks? There are these icons present here. So again, session is one of the most basic tasks that you'll be working with. Apart from that, let's say you want to execute certain commands, Windows or Unix command while you're executing a workflow, or maybe let's say you've completed the execution of a mapping and certain command has to be executed. So in that case, what you can do is you can execute this statement. Now you can write the command using the command task, and then it will get executed when its turn comes. Let's say a simple command, maybe let's say you want to shut down your system after you've completed the execution of a workflow. Now when you're working with large data set, it takes its time. You're not quite sure on when the workflow would get executed. So just to be on the safe side, you'll just put a command task at the end of that workflow so that it shuts down the system. Okay. Or let's say you've completed the execution of multiple workflows and you want to be informed about that. Then what you can do is you can use the next task here, that is email. So once you've linked a web service to your Informatica PowerCenter, which I'll be telling you in the next session, okay, then you can always schedule a mail that comes as part of your workflow. So let's say you're executing multiple workflows, maybe one of it has failed. So what you can do is you can take a complete log and make sure you get mail with respect to that same. So all that can be done using Informatica PowerCenter Workflow Manager. Okay, so let's not waste any time and let's go ahead and create our first workflow. Now to do that, what you need to do is go to the workflow tab here, select it and click on create option. Now one thing you need to remember while you're creating workflow, again there is a naming convention you need to follow. So it is going to be W followed by the name of the mapping that you had created. That was M_M followed by customer join. Okay, once you click on OK, automatically the workflow gets created. To know if workflow has been successfully created, you can just check if the start icon is present in your workflow designer workspace. Now comes the time of creating a session task. Again, I had told you a session task basically is a task which is going to be associated to a mapping. So when you're going to execute a session task, then a mapping gets executed and the transfer of data from the source to the target takes place. So I'm just going to left click on this and then again click on my workspace. So here what it is asking me is it's asking me which mapping has to be associated to this session. So I have only one mapping at the moment, which is my M_customer_join, which we have just created. So I'm going to select it and click on OK. So a session is going to be created. But just creating a session is not the end of our workflow. You need to connect the start to the session icon. Why you need to connect? Basically you're telling the flow on which the session has to get executed. So if we go back to that image that we are discussing. So here you can see the flow where you're first executing your session 3, simultaneously you're executing session 1 because these two are not affected. Only when session 1 gets executed completely, then will your session 2 get executed. Okay, after that simultaneously you'll be checking the decision that you have specified here, and based on the value of that decision you're going to decide which of these two has to get executed. Okay, so again connectivity is very important here. Now to connect your task, that is from start to your session task, it's quite straightforward. You have this option known as link task. So just select it and then you need to define the start and end point of your link. So it's going to start from start icon here and then it's going to go to my session. So when you do that, you can see here the tasks have been linked and you have defined the flow. So clear to here? Any doubts? Okay, so Adam has a very good question here. So let me just put it across. So Adam is asking me, what do I do if I have multiple mappings that are linked to each other? Would it affect my sessions? Definitely not, Adam. That's a very good question. Let me just take an example of 3 mappings. Okay, so the output of my first mapping is going to be the input for the second, output of the second is going to be input of the third. Now when you're executing, as long as the session associated to my first mapping comes first, second is coming anytime after the first session gets executed, and the third comes after the second's execution. As long as this order is maintained, there would not be any problem with respect to working with multiple maps. Is that clear, Adam? Okay. Now again, what you need to do is you need to modify the session properties to meet our requirement. So let me just double click this. And here again you have the option of making it reusable. Once you make it reusable, it will be available inside your sessions option here. Okay, again it's same for all the tasks. If you make it reusable, it can be found in the corresponding folders. Okay, so once you have done with this, since we don't need to make it reusable, just go to the mappings tab here. So here in the sources you can see all the 3 files it's working with. Now one thing I want you guys to remember is that if your source file is not present in the default folder, okay, then you need to specify the path of that folder here, because what happens is in the specified path will this check. Now again, to those of you who don't remember where it is inside your Informatica installation. You need to go into the version, then the server option here, and infra_shared. So it has to be inside the src folder. Okay, always remember this is the default location where Informatica checks for your source data. Now if it is not present here, make sure you specify the correct path as well as the correct file name. If you miss out on any one of these small things, then your workflow actually fails. So remember to check these before you go ahead and execute your workflow. Okay, now again, just make sure you have all the three are the same. Then when you come down to the target option here, now since it is going to be writing into my database, it's going to use a relational writer. If you see the resources, it is using a file reader. Let's say you're going to write an output into a flat file. In that case, you'll be using a file writer instead of a relational writer. And connectivity, let me just change this. Again, you can configure your connectivity object, so that is not at all a problem here. Extensively, we're discussing that for those of you who have not successfully installed Informatica on your system in our installation session. So there's not much that you need to check with respect to the target option here. Just make sure you're using the correct connection object. Okay, once all this is set, just click on apply, click on OK, and then it's time you save your workflow. Again, same like our workflow designer, when you save it, Informatica automatically checks if there are any errors, and then if it is correct, it gives you the option of valid. So clear here? Okay, so Deepthi wants to see an output to be a flat file. Definitely, Deepthi, what I'll do is the advanced use case, right? The output of that, I'll make it a flat file. So that way you can understand both output. There are multiple formats of which you can give the output. Now we've seen that while you were creating the target table, but again, database and flat files are some of the most commonly used formats. Now with this, we've actually come to a conclusion of our phase 3, where we've actually understood what is a workflow, and we've also gone ahead and created a workflow using a session task as well. Now only on the execution of this workflow will the transfer of data from the source to the target destination happen. Like you had repository service which maintained and looked after your repository manager, you have another very essential service here that is known as integration service. Now what integration service does is that it actually checks your workflow and your mapping, and then it begins the transfer of the data from the source to the target destination. So your integration service is actually the service which takes care of the transfer of data as well as transformation and all the operations that has to be performed on this data. But how does it know which data it has to take, what it has to do? It refers to our workflow and our mapping. Okay, so always remember it is actually your integration service that transfers the data from the source to the target destination. So this is something that you can be asked in an interview question. Alright, so since there are no questions, let me go back to the presentation and let's talk about the final phase. Before that, this is a simple overview of your PowerCenter workflow manager. Again, this is your workspace, this is your navigator and output. So it's a very common thing that you see across the different PowerCenter tools. Okay, now coming down, the fourth phase is something that is going to be handled by Informatica PowerCenter Workflow Monitor. Now, your workflow manager is actually a client tool that helps you check the execution of a workflow as well as check the stats of that workflow. Your workflow monitor is basically a tool used to check the status of a workflow which is going to be executed. Now whether it has successfully been executed, how many rows have been transferred from the source to the target destination, how many have you operated on, how fast are you operating on. Apart from that, let's say your workflow fails, then why does it fail? If you're rejecting certain rows, why are you rejecting all these rows, and so forth. So all this can be found in your workflow monitor, and your workflow monitor is something that looks like this. But rather than showing it to you, let me actually show you how it looks like. Now instead of launching the workflow monitor from here, what I'm going to do is I'm going to right click my workspace and I can start my work. Now I can either start it from this option here, or I can go to the workflow tab and select start workflow from. Immediately when you do this, automatically Informatica PowerCenter workflow monitor is launched. Okay, now you can see my workflow has been executed successfully, and you can also see my session task has executed successfully. Now again, when you talk about a workflow, you could have multiple session tasks or multiple tasks that are part of that workflow. Even when one fails, you are able to identify and understand what is the exact reason. Now to understand the details of the session task, all you need to do is right click on it and go to get run properties. Now this will give you the complete details with respect to the data you're working with. Now you can see the target successful data, that is 10,000 rows. So I actually worked on 10,000 rows from my source and then transferred it to 10,000 rows to my target. If you go into the source target statistics, you can see here from my first file 4,000 rows were taken, second file had 3,000 and third file had 3,000. All of this combined 10,000 rows were directly loaded into my target table without a single problem. Now it had taken only few seconds to execute it, but this may not always be the same. It depends actually on the data and the size of that data as well. Now let's say you want to verify whether the data has been successfully imported into your database. So to do that, what you need to do is just go back. Let me launch my database manager. So again, I am using Oracle database in my system. So I'm using Oracle SQL Developer. You can use your corresponding choice. So here, if you go into your Oracle HR_TGT, now this is my target database. All right. Check the data in your database by, you can either say select staff from your table name, that is TGT_customer_join. Once you do that, I can just execute my code and you can see here the output. But you want to verify it perfectly, then what I'd suggest is say select count star, then it will give me the actual number of rows present in my database. So if I say run statement, you can see there are 10,000 rows present. So any doubts till here? So another thing before I go ahead and look at the next use cases, let's say with respect to a specific session. Now here, once you right click on your workflow and get session logs, so here you get the complete details with respect to what has happened with respect to your data transfer. Let's say certain row. Now here if you see, wait, before I talk about that, so here you can see applied rows, affected rows, rejected rows and throughput. Okay, but let's say there are certain rows that do not meet your condition, then they get rejected. So if you go inside your session logs, okay, you can identify why these statements were rejected. Or let's say your total workflow in itself has failed. Now the details with respect to that can be found in the first tab, that is task details. So why the error has occurred, you can get the complete details will be present here. So let's say a specific session has failed and you've made certain corrections and you want to restart that workflow from that session itself. So in that case, just right click that session and then you can choose the option of restart workflow from that task. Now this is not just for a session, any task. Or let's say a session has crashed and then you can recover from that as well. Okay, so there are different options here. This is all something that is left for you to explore. Okay, so you guys are clear with this? Can you guys give me a quick confirmation in the chat box that you're clear with this? Okay, so I've got a confirmation from everyone. That's great to see. Now let's go back to our PowerCenter designer and begin with the second use case that we had worked with. So there what we needed was we needed to identify the top 3 selling categories. Now first thing what I'll be doing is I'll be creating a new mapping. So for that, go to your mappings tab and select create option here. Okay, now let me just name it M_most selling categories and click on OK. Now what I need to identify the top 3 selling categories are basically 2 other sources. So there I actually need my transaction details as well as my product details. So let me just load them as well to my work folder. Right click and let me clear this all. Okay, so that it becomes more organized. So what I need here is I need to import the details of the product as well as the details of the transaction. Now the reason I'm taking both the tables, first thing is that the details of transaction tells me which product is sold. And when I take the details of the product itself, there I can know which department it belongs to. So that way, once I join these two data, it becomes easier for me to identify which department sells the most number of products. So go to Sources tab and select Import from File. Here, let me just select all files. So you have your product details here. Now, with respect to what is present in my product table, I have the product ID, the name of the product, the price, the seller, the rating of that product, the department which it belongs to, the company which it belongs to, the number of products that were sold, and the discount. Okay, once you click on finish, the product table has been loaded. So let me go ahead and load the transaction table. I'll just click on finish here. And I have successfully loaded my product table as well as my transaction table. So any doubts still here? Okay, so I've got a confirmation from everyone. So let's go forward and begin with the mapping part. So let me load these two tables to my mapping definition. You can select them directly and bring them here. So I'll just arrange this and then let me link these two tables using the product ID as the condition. Now to do that, what you're going to do is you're going to use a new transformation known as joiner transformation. Now your joiner transformation helps you join two tables as long as they have at least one common column present between these two tables.
So once you have that, you can use the joiner transformation to join these two tables. So again, go to Transformations tab, click on Create, and you go to Joiner. Here, let me call it join underscore category and create. So I've already created a joiner transformation. What I need to do is I need to bring these rows to the joiner transformation. Again, select all from here, drag it and drop it to the joiner transformation. Similarly, from the transaction table, drag it and drop it. So I have linked these two tables to my joiner transformation. But what I need to do is that I need to specify the condition based on which these two tables are going to be joined. Okay, to do that, just double click this and go to the conditions tab here. Now here you can just click on new condition and then you can select the condition based on which these two tables have to be selected. Now here you may find something new, that is master and detail. Now for now, don't worry about what exactly it is, but just to give you a simple understanding, one table is considered to be master, the other is considered to be detail. So from my master table, that is invoice, I'm going to select the product ID. My product ID from my invoice table is equal to the product ID from my product table. Okay, any doubts still here? Okay, so just click on apply and I have specified the condition based on which these two tables are going to be joined. Now what I need to do is I need to group this data based on the department which it belongs to. So for that, you're going to use another transformation known as aggregator transformation. So just select aggregator transformation and you can place it here. Now for creating any transformations, you can either go to the transformations tab here or you can select them from here. Okay, so here let me just take all this, drag it and drop it to the aggregator transformation. And here inside the aggregator transformation, what I'm going to do is that I'm going to group these products. Okay, so you have a group by condition here. Now what am I going to group them by? I'm going to group them by the department which they belong to. So select group by. Now in my final table, I don't want most of these details. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to make sure that these details are not going to be part of my output. So to do that, what you can do is you can just check this option as in for output. So you have three options here. This is an input, this is an output, and this is a variable. For now, don't worry about variables. So just remember, if you don't want any specific column to be part of your output, you can change it as part of any transformation. So I don't want my product ID, I don't want my name of product, price, the seller, rating. Now these things don't make a difference to me in my final output. I just want to know the top 3 selling categories and the number of products that they have sold. So I'll just remove all this. And here what I'll do is I'll add a new port, that is a new column, okay, which basically is a count. Now what does this do? This basically counts the number of products that has been sold in that category. Okay, now this is not something that is an input. Okay, so I'm going to uncheck the input option and this is something that has to go as the output. So this is something that is going to compute it. So now comes the question on what exactly it should count. So for that, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go inside this and I'm going to define that it has to count the number of times a department specifically comes. Okay, so for that, just say count. Under ports, I just need to select department, close it, and then click on validate. Now, one of the key features of Informatica is that let's say you're writing a formula that you're not quite sure of. You can always validate it to check whether the formula that you're writing is correct or not. So here what I've done is I've just written count the number of times department occurs and then I have validated it. So I have grouped my data based on department and then I have put a count on it. Just click on apply and click on OK. So with this what I get is I get a count of number of times each department comes in. But I need to sort this data as well. So for that what I'm going to do, I'm going to create a new transformation known as sorter transformation. So go to transformation, say sorter, and here let me just name it sort underscore department. Now what my sorter transformation does is that it takes the input and then sorts it based on a certain key value. So I'm going to take only my department and count to my sorter transformation. Inside here, I'm going to specify the key. Now key basically is based on the value of which column you're going to sort this data. Now I need to sort it based on the key value of count. So I'm going to select key option here and then I'm going to change it as descending order. So that way I get to know which department has sold the most number of products. So click on apply and click on OK. So this basically helps me sort the data in a descending order based on the department. So I get to know which department has sold how much product. But again, if you go back to our problem statement, we need to identify the top 3 selling departments. Okay, so in that case, I need to take only the top 3. For that, you're going to use a new transformation known as rank transformation. Now, I know these transformations may seem different to you, but don't worry about this. You'll be talking about each of these transformations as part of our Informatica transformation session. So there we'll extensively talk about each of these transformations individually and how to work around with them. For now, you just need to have a simple understanding of what each of these transformations does. Finally, I have rank underscore department. Okay, I'll create this and done. Okay, so again, take these 2 columns present from here, join to my rank transformation, and inside my rank transformation, go to the properties tab. Now, here what you need to do, you have this option top and bottom. That is, from my complete data, which section should I take out it? Either should I take it from the top or should I take it from the bottom? Okay, so in our case, I want it from top because it is in a descending order. And when you talk about number of ranks, it basically tells how many fields should you take. Now I want the top 3, so I'm going to make it 3. The rest, everything remains same. Just click on apply and click on OK. Now finally, I need to create a target definition. Now my target definition can be same as my rank transformation. So just right click on it and go to create and add target. I'll just modify my target definition here as well. Let me clear this. I'll rename it as TGT underscore most selling department. Okay, so again, I'm going to store this as part of my database, but let's say I want to create a flat file in this case. So that way what I'll do is I'll go to flat file option here, and then you can specify what kind of flat file it should be, whether it should be a delimited flat file or a fixed file. Again, if you go to the advanced tab here, you can specify what kind of delimiter you want to use as well. Now by default, it has selected to be a comma separated flat file, but if you want to change that, you can specify it here itself. Click on OK and click on apply. So my output is going to be a flat file. Now come back to your mapping, remove the existing target definition and drag and drop the updated target definition. Finally, select all and connect it to your target definition and then go ahead and save it. So you can see here my mapping is validated. Now let me show you how to create a workflow automatically. So just right click on the workspace, go to generate workflow option, click on next. So here you can see the prefix for the workflow is set as WF and session is set as S. Next, you don't need to make any major changes here. You can make changes here in your workflow manager as well. So click on finish and you have successfully created a workflow. Now go back to your workflow manager. Now here you cannot see it directly because it is not synced. So in that case, what you can do is just disconnect your work folder and then reconnect it. So here you can see we have 2 workflows here. Earlier there was just one, now 2 are present. So first right click on your work folder and click on open and then right click on the workflow to open it. So this is my workflow that has automatically been created for my mapping. So any questions still here? Okay, Tyson is asking me, can't we always create a workflow automatically? Definitely, Tyson, you can create it, but on a real case situation where you're working with multiple mappings, there you need to manually create that. Okay, so there, let's say again, in going back to the same case where we had discussed when you're working with multiple mappings that are related to each other. In those cases, you need to manually create a workflow itself. The mapping that we had defined was a simple mapping. So that case, there's no problem for me to directly generate a workflow. But again, coming back to our problem, in a real-time scenario, you'll be working with multiple mappings. There'll be a lot of sessions that you'll be creating with respect to that same. So in that case, it is suggested that you manually create the workflow itself. Is that okay, Tyson? Okay. So now the last modifications that we have to do is with respect to our session properties. So just double click on session task and go to the mappings tab here. So here always make sure the correct path is set and the correct file name is taken. Okay, so it's checking the default path and the correct file names have been set. Now, if you come to the target definition, you can see file writer has been set. Earlier we had seen it to be a relational writer when we were writing it into a database. Now it has set as a file writer. Now, one thing you need to remember while you're working with flat files is that first you need to specify headers. Now by default, no header is set. Now our output should have field names present. So I'm going to set the headers to be output field names. Okay, and the other thing is by default the extension is going to be set as out and I need to change it to .csv. Okay, this way it will give me a comma separated flat file to be the output. Okay, once you've done this, just click on apply and click on OK. You can go ahead and save this mapping, and let's go ahead and execute. Right click and select start workflow. If you go back to your workflow monitor, you can see the workflow has successfully executed. Now you can see here from 3000 rows of my product and 50,000 of my product, only 3 rows have been successfully taken into my target definition. Okay, so let me just show you the output here. Now again, one thing you need to remember is by default your Informatica creates it in the default target folder itself. That is again present inside your Informatica version server and then infra_shared, and here you have a folder known as target files. So here is where your target file is created. So you can see here TGT most selling departments. This is my target output file. So if I open this, so you can see here the top selling departments. Now toys is a department which sells about 1,822. I have tools which sells 2,315 and sports that sells 2,439. Okay, now let's say if you want to modify this to take the top 5. That way what you can do is just go back to your workflow. Here go inside your rank transformation. Go to the properties tab and I'll just change it to top 5. Click on apply. Save it. Go back to your workflow designer. You need to refresh this. So inside your workflow, just right click on the session icon, refresh mapping, and then you need to save it once again. Once you've done this, let's go back and run this. Now there may be a problem, so make sure you have closed your target file. So here you can see it has failed. Okay, this was mainly because that file was open present here. And Deepti, coming back to your question, so here you can see there was an error that had occurred. My workflow has failed. Now the error that had occurred, you can see here, the process cannot access the file because it is being used by another process. That was the file was open here. So that's the reason it could not occur. So anytime you come across an error, this is something that you will meet. So again, since I have closed it, I can right click on my workflow and then I can restart it here. So you can see it has successfully executed. Now if I go back to that folder and open it, you can see the top 5 selling categories. Okay. So with this, we've discussed all 4 of Informatica PowerCenter's tools, and we've also seen how you can use each of these tools to solve 2 different use cases, a simple use case as well as a complex use case as well, where we have used multiple transformations. So any doubts with respect to Informatica PowerCenter tools, any tool that you're not clear with, or any concept, any step that I have followed that you're not clear with? Okay, Adam is asking me, will we be talking more about transformations? Yes, definitely, Adam. Transformation is one of the core concepts of Informatica itself. So we have a separate session where we'll be extensively discussing about each of the transformation in Informatica, mainly around about the 20 major transformations you'll be working around. Okay, and you also have a video on our Edureka channel which talks about the 6 major transformations in Informatica. That is something that I would recommend you go through to have a simple basic understanding. But in our upcoming sessions, we'll be talking about all the transformations that you need to know. Does that answer your question, Adam? Okay, so now that we have seen all the tools, let's try to look at the Informatica architecture to understand how all this fits in together. Now, if you look at the image below, you have your sources here present, and then you have your target definition. Okay, now your sources communicate with your Informatica PowerCenter using an ODBC driver. Now your sources always interact with your PowerCenter tool based on a certain driver. So here it's written ODBC, but based on what kind of source you're using, the corresponding driver would be set. Similarly, the PowerCenter tool also communicates with the target definition based on a specific driver based on which you're going to be writing. Now again, we had talked about 2 major services, that was the repository service and the integration service. I had told you integration service is the key part which transfers the data from the sources to the target definition. And the communication between the sources to integration service is through native drivers, that is based on what kind of source it is, or ODBC if you're using an Oracle database. Similarly, the communication with the target definition is also based on the native driver or ODBC driver. Now, your integration service communicates with your PowerCenter tools using a TCP/IP communication protocol, same with the repository service. Now, the communication between integration service and repository service is one of the key parts, and both your integration service and repository service is present in your domain. Your domain is basically your complete Informatica option, including your client and your server side. Okay, so your domain again is basically your core component, and each of the system which has a client tool would be considered to be a node. So The repository tools can be a node and your domain would be a core part on which your administrators would be working on. Again, with respect to administrator, you have your administrative console. Now you would have seen this while you were installing Informatica PowerCenter. Now if you've not seen it, let me just show you. You can just open your browser and then you can specify your host name. So for me, the host name and the port had been set while I was installing Informatica. Now here, if I give the corresponding username and password that I had set while installing Informatica, I can log into my administrative console. So this is what your administrative console looks like. Now here I have my domain as well as my node. So in an organization, now this is basically a single node configuration because I'm using my domain and node in the same system. But while you're working on an industry, a single domain is going to have multiple nodes and it can also have different repository services as well. So let's say you have different teams working on different projects, then you're going to be preferably creating different repositories and assigning different repository services for each of those repositories as well. So similarly, you're going to have different integration services for these projects as well. So all that can be configured here. Okay, and even your license management is something that comes here. Even in your log section, you have a complete list of logs that are available with respect to each node. You can even monitor what each of the nodes are doing from the domain. You can generate reports here, as well as you can even work with respect to security. So again, security is something that most administrators work, where you're going to assign corresponding privileges to user as well as you're going to assign corresponding privileges to each of these users. So again, coming back, let's say a team leader is going to have more privileges as compared to a developer because he's on a higher level and he'll be someone who will be mainly monitoring and working with respect to your repository aspect. He's going to be part of a different group, he's going to have a different role, he's going to have a different set of permissions as well. And finally, let's say if you are working with respect to the cloud integration, then the configurations would be present here where you can either deploy your projects to the cloud, you can share data to the cloud. Now all that features would be present here. Now I have not configured the cloud operation here, so that's the reason it's not present here. Okay, now coming back to our architecture. So your admin console communicates with your domain through a HTTPS protocol. Okay, mainly because your admin console works on a browser, so the communication is with respect to that same. Now all the details with respect to your domain is going to be present in your domain metadata database. Again, your domain database is going to store the metadata with respect to all the services as well as the communications channels that you're going to be using. Apart from that, your repository service is going to have its repository database, and this is going to be communicated using a native driver. So I hope you've got a simple understanding of how Informatica works, and you've got a complete idea of how each of these components that we have discussed as part of today's session fits in to the Informatica PowerCenter architecture. So any questions with respect to the same? Okay, I have a question here from Bharat. He's asking me, do we have to configure the repository database or does it get configured? Okay, Bharat, while you are installing the database, now Bharat, the repository database is something you have to configure. Now I have actually configured my repository database to be part of Oracle, but again, it's as per your choice, and organizations at times vary based on the product which they are creating. So repository database is something you have to configure, but the repository service is something that runs parallelly whenever you launch Informatica PowerCenter. It ensures that everything that you're doing in your work folder gets synchronized to your repository database. Does that answer your question, Bharat? Okay, so with this we come to a conclusion of today's session. So just to summarize what we have learned today, we talked about what is Informatica, we saw the different product lines that Informatica has and why Informatica is leader in data integration market. After that, we spoke about ETL process, where it helped you understand how a data is going to be transformed, how the data is extracted from different sources, and then it goes ahead, you perform transformations and then load it into a target data warehouse. To have a better understanding of Informatica PowerCenter tools, we even looked at 2 different use cases in the e-commerce domain. After that, I also helped you understand how a problem can be divided into 4 major phases based on each of the tools. So once you've broken down your use case into 4 phases, it becomes easier for you, because if you're clear as to what a tool is going to be doing, then it becomes easier also for you to break it down to what has to be achieved in each of that phase. Then we saw each of the PowerCenter client tools, how each of them work and how they communicate with respect to each other. And finally, we looked at Informatica's architecture and understood how each of these components that we have discussed as part of today's session fit in the whole picture. So any questions with respect to today's session? In case if you're not clear with any concepts, do let me know. Else, I hope you have a great weekend. Happy learning.
I hope you enjoyed listening to this video. Please be kind enough to like it, and you can comment any of your doubts and queries, and we will reply to them at the earliest. Do look out for more videos in our playlist and subscribe to our Edureka channel to learn more. Happy learning!